With 3.1 LEM update, traditions are changing, and what a change it is. The main question everyone's gonna be asking, is espionage the tradition to pick first? No. But before that, if you enjoyed the content, consider clicking that join button for the YouTube's members. All the support is really appreciated. With the recent change, this rather old system is redone. There are a few new traditions, some have been changed a little, but surprisingly most remain the same. In general, this tradition change, after testing it for a little bit, did not seem to be any more difficult than it was, so that's a decent little change. Visually it's appealing, so to those old or new to Stellaris, let's get explaining on what these things called traditions really are, as well as where they could be useful. Okay, so first and foremost, consider traditions like more classical perks from any game you've ever played. A feature, stat increasement, or a new ability, basically. These things, like all performance-altering drugs, will pump you up and make your less useful organs shrivel up, but without the shriveling. So, you get a starting bonus when you pick a tradition, as well as for fully finishing it. The perks inside work like miniature tech tree, which are ordered by the arrows, you can see. And the way you unlock these traditions, as well as those perks inside, is by the uptick of your Empire's Unity resource. By finishing a tradition, you also get to pick one Ascension perk. These things really affect your Empire and should not be picked lightly. So examine each that is available for you at the time and pick with care. Of course, when the occasion rises, you can leave a tradition empty and immediately pick another one if it suits you, but often it's a waste. Alright then, well, let's then quickly go over each tradition one by one so that you know what to pick next time you roll up a match. I'll then just go in alphabetical order, starting with the adaptability. Whatever. This tradition, generally speaking, is great for when you're after those lesser habitable planets, as the name implies, and generally won't be that useful early on, but rather a great pick for third or fourth one after you have established borders and economy. I tend to think of this as more of an endgame pick when you have nothing better to pick. Diplomacy's useful if you play like a pussy. I mean, a weakling. A limp-wristed, vegan, pussy-footed wanker. Why have need for diplomacy when you can crush your enemy and vassalize them, or better yet, destroy them? But seriously though, it's a solid second tradition to pick if you have your neighbors set up and you're up for that diplomacy game. So you can establish that federation and all its, benefits? I think there were some benefits. Benefits being in the loser's camp, or, well, if you figure out what diplomacy is good at that could not be solved or replaced by mass amounts of violence and death, well, let me know then. Discovery. Well, this is the first tradition that most players should be picking. The main reason is to mainly get that 35% faster surveying of systems perk. Depending on how you play, yes, this can be replaced by simply spamming science ships, that's true. But efficiency has its merits too. You would be wasting the precious resources for expansion then. So yes, Discovery also adding research bonuses is the top pick for the first tradition. You know what's funny? That thing between your legs. Oh, and also domination tradition. It's certainly not something that you would be picking as your first tradition for sure. Overall, it's geared towards upkeep of your empire rather than expansion or improvement. I feel that it's a lesser choice for a mid-game pick, but even then, I usually have something else to pick, like adaptability. I'd say it's better than diplomacy, but at least that travesty has an early game reason for existing. This, on the other hand, well, I feel it needs a better adoption bonus to even be considered, frankly. Speaking of first tradition picks, if Discovery is not your thing, I often find expansion to be a great choice. As the name implies, it boosts your empire's growth, and in a very beginning, that's exactly what you need to do. Pop growth speed increasement, starbase upkeep, and influence cost reductions, all pretty good boosts early on. Though playing a Total War empire, you kinda already have it built in as is, so Discovery basically becomes the only option at that point. Harmony is that kind of a tradition that really comes in hand at the end of the mid-game, reducing upkeep on pops and adding edict capacity and other little bonuses that only are noticeable with big amounts of existing structure and population. It seems unassuming but surprisingly good pick, unlike Domination, despite its good name. And here we come to the newly added base game tradition, the Mercantile. It's all about that trade value. If for some reason you're trying to play as that trading/megacorp type empire, well, this is the thing for you. First or second pick for sure, though it is a rather simple tradition, so aside from those few okay perks, it's really not much to look at. A good stepping stone early on. When your economy is in the shitter and you need that boost, the mid-game tradition pick is certainly Prosperity. I deem this tradition to be incredibly crucial to take when you have built out enough of your planets and systems to benefit from the bonuses it brings. Added resources cut down upkeep and other little bonuses that really come in handy at that point. Then, another new tradition, Subterfuge, utilizing spy networks and all that espionage crap. Now, while I'm not a big fan of this part of the game, the tradition, well, it's surprisingly simple and straightforward. Obviously, you won't be picking it as your first tradition. That would be incredibly stupid since you have no one to spy on to begin with. But as your fourth or fifth tradition when you start doing wars, well, yeah, it can get pretty handy. And speaking of wars, now we come to a solid second pick tradition in most of my games, the War Intensifying Supremacy. Now, it used to be that one of its perks increased defense station power, but since the change made to traditions, it has been removed, and instead now focuses on purely attack capability. Back in the day, I always picked this as my second or third tradition for that very own reason, for defense stations. However, these days with these changes, it's a solid pick for when you go to war, if at all. Now, if you're that kind of a disgusting vomit stain that pledges oneself to such ideals as harmony and peace among empires, well, you can fuck off. I mean, for your kind-hearted bleeding hearts, you might never need to pick this. And finally, we come to the last new tradition, Unyielding. This tradition has become the second pick for me when playing Total War Empires, as now this is the tradition that holds that perk, which improves the station power. This tradition deals in all sorts of defensive bonuses. Think of it as the opposite of supremacy in a way. Though the really only noteworthy perk here is that station power one, so you will most likely just pick it and immediately pick another tradition without finishing this one. That's, well, at least what I do. And there you go, the traditions. Ascension perks themselves also are interesting and change up how your empire going forward plays in a smaller or larger way, especially with the crisis one. So I'll leave that one for some other time, but traditions themselves, though visually changed, aren't really that different. Personally, for my playstyle, I usually go with Discovery first, max it out, then take Technological Ascendancy. After that, take Unyielding with that Starbase perk only, then immediately take Expansion, max that one out. For second Ascension perk, it goes for Engineered Evolution if possible, otherwise Voidborn if possible, and if that's not available, then Nihilistic Acquisition and Abduct, and violently probe my enemies' pops. Then for the fourth tradition, usually I'm big enough that Prosperity is great choice. And as I maxed that out as well, at that point it depends on what the game state is, so I won't bore you there. Bottom line, traditions might look scary, but they are pretty cool, so don't worry and just pick whatever you feel might help you at the moment the most. Oh, and I would be remiss if I did not mention the additional mods that add extra traditions and ascension perks, so go check those out once you're done with this stuff, because they're pretty cool. But you know what else you could check out? Well, if this helped you out, you could always return the favor by becoming a patron or YouTube member. It all really does help out making the content and all that good stuff. All the links in the description. Now, as for traditions themselves, I would love to see a bigger perk trees under each tradition with simpler bonuses, but as is, this is what we got.